Dr. Becky, as they call you. Now, let me tell you something. You have this rabid following of people, and you've got your latest book, by the way. I mean, my girls are grown, but I got to tell you, I mean, there's all kinds of nuggets in here for me. So thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do, Becky. You're making so many parents' lives better. It's awesome.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Tell me this real quick. Like, how would you describe your approach to parenting? For those of folks who aren't particularly familiar with your work, I mean, get us inside of your high-level approach.
I mean, I'm going to describe it in a couple of ways. You know, first of all, especially when I think about you and probably some of your audience, I believe we teach parents to lead their families in a way that's very much in line with how the best coaches, I would imagine, lead their teams, right? And the best captains talk to their players. To me, it's about seeing people as inherently good inside, believing they have potential, and believing that your job is to set up the conditions for success. And so what that means is, as a leader, as a parent, I have high expectations, right? I can set boundaries. I know that I have authority in a situation, but I also know that the best way to flex that authority isn't yelling and screaming and shaming and punishing. We cannot punish anybody into learning new things. It actually just doesn't even make sense to think that that would work. And so along with that authority and boundary setting I have as a parent, I also know that to do my job well, I have to stay connected to my kid, and I have to actually teach them skills they didn't have in the first place to get the type of behavior change I'm looking for. And so I kind of call that, because I think it's helpful to have a name, sturdy leadership or sturdy parenting. And I think it's true of sturdy leadership as a CEO or as a sports coach or as a parent, right? I set boundaries. I kind of have to set up those conditions for success. I make key decisions that I know are in someone's long-term best interest. And at the same time, I connect to my kids. I see their experiences and feelings as real. And I know my job is to bring out all the good stuff inside of them.
Yeah. And I love the way you talk about good inside. And I mean, just because it's this belief system at some level that we're coming at things from this place that people are good inside. Our kids are good inside. We as parents want to reframe moments to be good inside. Why do you think sort of this good inside philosophy, approach, methodology, belief system at some level resonates with so many people? Because clearly it does. I mean, you have a rabid fan base of people who are listening to what you're saying. It's great.
I think there's a couple things about it. Number one, I think good inside, as much as we get your attention about tantrums and sleep and sibling rivalry and rudeness, which, by the way, definitely in my wheelhouse to help you manage, we really help a parent more than we help their parenting, which says a lot because we really help their parenting. And I think the whole idea of seeing someone as good inside, even as they struggle, I think there's something deeply healing to adults that is kind of catching fire, where if we look back on our early years and think about our hardest moments, or honestly, if we think about our hardest moments now as an adult, yes, we acted out, or we made some bad decision, or we were having a hard time. But you remember what it's like to be looked at or approached as if you are your latest behavior. And I think there's this fork that we either look at bad behavior as a sign of who someone is or as a sign of the skills they need to build. And if you look at bad behavior as a sign of who someone is, you feel reduced in that moment. Like you feel like everyone thinks you're a horrible person. Ironically, you just add shame and blame, which makes behavior harder to improve, which is the deepest irony of the whole thing. But when you're at your worst, you don't want someone, by the way, to permit bad behavior. Sometimes they need to stop you, which is what a boundary is. But when you're having a hard time and somebody looks at you and sees that you're a good person underneath and wants to help bring that out, that is the ultimate form of leadership. And I think good inside so deeply resonates as a parenting approach because it's also an approach that's deeply healing. for all of us as adults.
That is such a powerful way to reframe particular moments,
Yes.
both for us and obviously it changes the way we show up.
Yes.
It's
I want to say two concrete things about that because I like to have concrete things. So number one, when someone acts out, the fork in the road is I either look at them like they're a bad person doing bad things or they're a good person having a hard time. A good person having a hard time to me is a good inside mindset in action, right? Which, by the way, if you want to start to see other people this way, we actually have to start with ourselves. So maybe you're thinking, oh, I did yell at someone at work the other day, or I wasn't at my best, or I had this awful play in, my sports game, whatever it was. If you can say, hold on a second, I was a good person who had a turnover, or I'm a good coach who yelled at my players just because I couldn't manage my own frustration. I'm a responsible person who keeps being late, to meeting my friends. As soon as you can separate your good identity from your bad behavior, it is so much easier to get grounded and to brainstorm about what you would need to improve. So that's one thing. The other thing I just want to share is, to me, one of the best skills we can take is this idea of building our MGI. When we watch someone act out, we tend to use what I call an LGI, the least generous interpretation, right? Where, again, like maybe it's my kid where they are in a hitting stage and all of a sudden, like, oh my goodness, my kid's a sociopath. They're going to go to jail. They're going to have no friends, right? That would be called, and I can do it too, a least generous interpretation of their behavior. The skill to build, or the muscle to build, is something I call an MGI, which applies to ourselves, other adults, kids, sports field, anywhere. What is the most generous interpretation of this person continually turning the ball over? What is the most generous interpretation of why my kid is lying to my face? What is the most generous interpretation of why I haven't gone to the gym for a month, even though every day I set my alarm early to go to the gym for the month, right? So as soon as we get in MGI mode, we're inherently separating identity from behavior, and we become much better problem solvers. And so that's just something I want to leave you and your listeners with. Like, that's something we could do in any area of our life. Just practice asking ourselves, what is the MGI? And it's really powerful what comes next.
I love that. I once heard a woman say, which I thought was really cool, which is sort of tangential to this, but she said whenever she gets feedback, particularly tough feedback, she says to herself, first I'm going to assume that it's true. Which is so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it allows you to show up in a different way. And what you're suggesting too allows us to show up very differently if we, when the kids ask us what's for dinner and we say breaded chicken and, and they go, right? What if we can sort of shift the way that we interpret that moment?
That's right.
Game
and that's
changer.
a good example. My kid is a good kid who wishes we were having something different for dinner. And if I want them to respond differently, well, yelling at them and sending them to their room probably isn't the best way. Like, what do we think our kid is doing? Googling more respectful ways to tell my parent I like other options for dinner. Like, that is not happening.
Right.
Your kid's feeling misunderstood, angry.
Right.
They have the reflection that we think they're a bad kid, and then we expect them to act like a good kid. Like, why? It doesn't even make sense. Why would that happen?
So instead, you would acknowledge the behavior and the frustration, and then you would essentially sort of say, hey, well, why don't you throw some suggestions out, and maybe you can help me make dinner later this week.
Yeah, I think let's actually go into the example, because the devil's always in the details. People will say, and again, as a world, we're getting increasingly bad at kind of nuance. We go from one rigid side to the other. So people say, so I'm not punishing my kid, so I'm rewarding my kid. No, if my kid said, oh, I hate chicken, I would never say, oh my God, I love you. Thank you for telling me your truth. Keep going, girl. No, there's a lot between two extremes.
Totally.
Now, first, yes, it is helpful to validate the feeling underneath the behavior. Big picture, we can't learn to manage feelings we don't believe we're allowed to have. We can't learn to manage feelings that we don't believe we're allowed to have. And every bad behavior, everyone, is a sign of feelings that were bigger than skills to manage those feelings. Everyone. So we have to level up someone's skills, which we'll get to, but we also have to validate the feeling. Validating feelings does not condone behavior. So let me show this in action. So let's say my kid says, oh, I hate chicken. And I actually use this example in my TED Talk. It was one of the reasons I got triggered. I hate chicken, right? And again, we all have moments where we get triggered and we're like, you're so spoiled and ungrateful. And probably we just had like a bad day and we were just waiting to unleash on someone. But let's say in the moment, we're having like a good day and we can like sustain ourselves. So my kid says this thing. If I'm not punishing them, I might say something simple like, you wish there was something different. But then I'm also going to say, I know there's another way you can say that to me. Okay. Or, oh, you're not in the mood for chicken. I get that. And look, I'm taking a breath, but there's another way to communicate that. And let's practice that starting tomorrow. But then this really matters. Whenever I talk about practicing new skills, parents are like, but do you really mean it? I was like, no, I really do. Again, imagine if there's someone who's missing every foul shot. It's just so interesting in sports. Like, I don't think anybody would feel good watching their kid miss every foul shot and then watching the coach say, you should know better. You're supposed to make foul shots, sit on the bench, and come back when you can make them. I mean, why would that work? Now the kid's just more anxious. What I'd want in a coach is someone who says, hey, even I'm taking you out of the game. Right now, you're a little bit of a liability on the court. We're in the end of the game, and we need someone who can make their foul shots. Tomorrow, let's get in the gym. And let's just like, I'm going to watch your form and something's off. And I know you can make progress here and I'm going to help you. I just don't know one person, Molly, who's saying, oh my goodness, that coach is really letting that kid get away with bad behavior. They're basically reinforcing missing. It's bizarre. We would never say that. We'd say that's a great coach. Okay. So in this example, what would be the similarity? I might say the next day to my kid, like I would in the gym, hey, you're allowed to be frustrated about dinner choices. We have a couple options. First of all, happy to hear your recommendations and have some of the dinner options be more in line with what you'd want. And also, there are going to be a lot of dinners that you don't love.
Yeah.
And so we have to get ready for that moment.
Yeah.
Like, what is something you could say to me when you don't like dinner that lets me know you're not terribly happy and is also respectful, right? And honestly, when a kid hears you say this, they actually are likely to brainstorm with you because it's kind of like your coach, or it's kind of like your coach saying that, hey, if you keep missing all these shots, I might pull you out. That's going to happen. And what do you think is happening? What do you think's happening on the line? Is it your form that changed? Do you have a talk track of, oh my goodness, I'm going to miss it. Should we work on that? Like, you know yourself well. What do you think is something we could work on in practice today? A kid is going to be more likely to work with a coach because they feel like the coach is on their team. But if a coach says, what's wrong with you? Do you not even care about the team?
Right.
Like, do you not think making foul shots at the end of the game is important? I'm sorry. Now all of a sudden the kid's like, my coach hates me. And now I feel defensive. And I'm going to have a harder time making progress. And we kind of have been parenting our kids this way for generations and calling it discipline. I don't know why someone said that once, but it doesn't make sense. It shuts kids down. It leads parents to be frustrated. And if we get into like a coaching mindset like we do of any skill we teach a kid in a sport, we actually can see so many parallels in parenting.
Well, I mean, girl, you know, I think sports is like a lens and a metaphor to about anything.
Yeah.
So you're speaking my language and I love it. I think you're right. I mean, parenting is leadership. It's coaching. Yes. And it's leveling up the skills. Now, tell me this, right? Like my girls now, our girls, my husband and I, you know, they're 22, 21, and 21. But I'm imagining, right, both of us coming home from the office. And what is your advice to sort of like somebody who's listening to what you just described, which I think in an optimal world with a full energy tank is outstanding. But like, there's a lot of times where it's like what you just described takes a little bit of energy and time. What's your advice to like, dude, I hear you, and heck yes, in a perfect world, I'm going to do all that. But wow. Like what's your,
so I have a lot of thoughts about that question. Okay. Because I actually, number one, I think as a life principle, we either spend time preparing or reacting. Yeah. They're both time. But however we tend to spend our time, we just don't mentally account for it the same way. So I hear this a lot. Becky, what you described takes a lot of time. Like, I'm going to actually talk to my kid about how to respond When they're upset, I'm going to have to say, you're allowed to be upset. I wonder if there's respect. Like, that takes a lot of time. Okay, this same parent, I know if I was watching like a camera in their home, I'd watch them yelling at their kids. I'd watch them for 10 minutes having a fight
time and energy
about
too.
it. I'd watch them not being able to fall asleep for half an hour because they feel so guilty. Okay, so and the reason I think this matters is I think it's the wrong question. I think we say to ourselves, I don't have time for that. But we're actually supposed to be saying, how am I spending my time? And is that time working for me? Or could I be more optimally spending time? We spend a lot of time in power struggles yelling at our kids. It's just reaction mode. That's really what it is. And anytime we start to spend time in a new way, it will feel like longer. But that's only because our brain plays tricks on us when we're spending time in a new way because it feels awkward because it's new and uncomfortable, that it feels longer. But I would bet you it's going to be shorter. The other thing is, I'm a pragmatist. Actually talking to your kid about, let's say, what to do when they don't like dinner, or how to handle when their sister gets an award and they feel really jealous. These things can be done in a car. These things can be done when you're walking to school. These things, I mean, it actually, a lot of these things take 45 seconds. And by the way, when you do this, your kid's not going to say, Mom, that was so profound. Like, I really needed that. Thank you. No, they're going to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
They're going to say something like, oh, you're being annoying. Can I have a snack? It still mattered. It still sunk in. And the whole thing took 45 seconds.
You know, and I love that. And I think it's also interesting to consider. I wrote a book called The Energy Clock because I think the other thing that is critical for all of us to consider as another layer on top of that is there is probably nothing that matters more to a parent than their children in life, right? Their spouse, there's other things, but I would argue that the love that we have for our children is so incredibly profound. And so I would also sort of push on that and say, why aren't we being remarkably intentional about ensuring we have the kind of energy we need when we get home? And how do we expect the expected? In other words, expect for people to complain about dinner because it's just kind of normal, unfortunately.
My goodness.
So expect them to not be happy. And I think that at some level, again, I don't know what your take would be on that because we're supposed to be expecting good inside, but I also think we have to be realistic to know that there's a high likelihood at some moment in the week somebody's going to push back on something. And how do we expect it? And how do we make sure that we have the energy for the relationships in our lives that really matter so that we can take the time, to your point?
Preach across the board. So there's a couple things I want to respond to there. Okay, number one, just the specifics, and then I'll get more general and more global. You say expect the expected. Exactly. I think about this phrase all the time. Remove the surprise. It's rarely a situation that we react to as much as being surprised by a situation. And if you think about that, a situation that's tough plus the element of surprise equals big reaction from us. Sure. We think the way to solve for that is to try to not have the situation happen. And so we do. We're like, you have to be grateful for every dinner I make. Even though honestly, like if my husband made a dinner I didn't want, I would feel free to be like, oh, thank you for making it, but not what I wanted. Or if I expected him to give me a necklace and he gave me a slow cooker for my birthday, I'd probably be like, oh man, I didn't really want this, you know? So we can't really control for the situation. We can have a lot more impact on the surprise element because I'm also big on talking to parents, like, what can you control? It's not, I mean, I agree with you. I want your kid's behavior to change and we'll get there. But if we're saying the only way for you to stay calm as a parent is for your 4-year-old or your 14-year-old to do a certain thing, that's giving a lot of power to your child. And I'd rather bet on you because you're the adult and I have faith in you.
Said.
So if you remove the surprise, to me, even just taking one moment, and anyone listening to this, be like, what is going to happen later today or tomorrow that tends to get under my skin? And maybe it's my kid's going to complain about dinner. That's a good example. If you can say to yourself, I expect my kid to complain about dinner and I can cope with that. Then, and this is actually one of the things in our membership is called the triggers program because parents get triggered. And I like a step-by-step process. Here is how you can reduce your triggers. And this is one of the things we talk about here. When you remove the surprise and you say, I'm expecting my kid to complain about dinner and I can cope with that. The funniest thing happens when your kid complains about dinner. Instead of it triggering you, like you feel like this insanely powerful magician. You're like, oh my goodness, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. I predicted it. Like you actually feel powerful.
Yeah.
And that shift from feeling overwhelmed and triggered to grounded and powerful, that's actually the shift we do for parents. Yes, we get their attention from tantrums and rudeness and all this thing, but I actually think good inside is a place that parents reclaim their power. Because the worst part of parenting is you feel out of control and without hope, and you feel powerless. You feel like your mood swings based on whether your kid is a tantrum in the grocery store. That's an awful way to feel. Imagine, again, like I'm just thinking the best coaches in the world don't completely lose it when their team is down 10 points. Like that coach would not do well. They're like, at some point, my team is going to be down 10 points and I have a game plan and we've practiced for that and I've practiced that and I believe I'm the best person to bring out the best in my team. Whether we win or lose, I can rally them. I actually hear from parents all the time, Dr. Becky, is it weird that I now look forward to my kid's next grocery store tantrum? Because actually, now that I know what to do, I actually feel like
for it.
Yes, just like, right? I mean, again, the best coaches aren't afraid of being in a deficit.
Sure.
They're like, oh, this is when anyone can coach when you're winning by 20 points. Anyone can parent when your kid is calm and, grounded. But knowing that you can crush the moments when ironically your kids need you the most, that feels really, really good. Now, just really quickly, what you said before, how can we get ourselves in this mindset and have the time and energy? Look, I'm a busy person too. Like I need things to be super efficient, right? And built for me. But I think the bigger question in parenting is, why do we all buy this age-old idea that parenting should come naturally? And I think I know why. Because the world has told us there's a, quote, maternal instinct. It's just, I think, at the best, it's harmful. At the worst, it's, I don't know, the thing that keeps parents feeling shitty about themselves. I mean, why would this come naturally? And even if there is an instinct, again, I'm thinking about in sports. Do you know any professional, I don't know, a basketball player who goes, I have a basketball instinct, so I never went to training camp. I never got a coach.
No.
I just have, and I'm sorry,
out.
Would anybody draft that player into the NBA who's like, I just have an instinct for things? You'd be like, you're undraftable. You're undraftable. Nobody wants that player. You want a player who has amazing athletic instincts and loves
discipline,
to learn.
mindset, resilience,
and loves to
curiosity.
learn.
Totally.
They love to learn. Loving, learning, and having instinct, that is the combination, right? And it's so interesting. I don't know why I'm going there for sports, but I went to Duke and I've been reading all this stuff about Cooper Flagg and how coachable he is. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks because Cooper Flagg is coachable, that means he's not naturally good at basketball. Those two things, clearly, he has natural basketball gifts. And he loves to learn. Okay, that is what I want parents to think, that if we believe we should only have natural parenting gifts and not have the best learning and resources around us, that is going to leave us feeling frustrated and without any energy to do any of this stuff. If our mindset is, wait, I of course have some natural instincts, but also this is the hardest job in the world. And the only thing that comes naturally in parenting is how we were parented. That's the only thing that comes naturally. So if you want to do anything even a little bit different, of course, we need the same things we would need to learn a new language. We need resources and practice and support.
That's so good. And I think, I always say talent isn't enough, right? Like a kid, I mean, if you're going to get to the NBA, for example, to use your Duke boy for an example, right? Who's obviously a complete stud. But to stay at the NBA, to stay at the highest level for a long period of time, he's going to have to tap into a lot of other things besides his God-given talent. No different than as a parent. Yes, we have maternal instincts potentially, right? Which is fantastic. However, we've also got to up-level our skills and not just rely on that quote-unquote talent or instinct or God-given gift. I want to just dig into resilience and sort of confidence for a hot second, because confidence is such a critical thing, I believe, with kids. And I'll share when my daughters were, 3, 2, and 2. My mom and dad, I think, I'm not sure if there's perfect parents, but if I could say that that it was them, I would. I mean, they are incredible. We're incredible. My brothers and I would both say that. They're absolutely incredible parents and always have been. So I said to my mom, I said, Mom, like, if you could think of one thing for our girls, like, that is just critical to ensure that we instill in them. She looked at me on the sandy beaches of northern Michigan, I think, one day and said, confidence. She said, Molly, if the girls are confident, they can navigate tough moments, solve challenging social situations, be, confident enough to be curious. She sort of went on. And so it really stuck with me because it was from her, who I admire so deeply. How do you even define confidence, right?
Yep.
And then how do we get started ensuring that we're building confidence in our kids?
Oh, I love this topic. And I love this topic because you're also helping everyone start with the definition. We can't build a thing if we don't know what the thing is. And if you define something in a way that isn't accurate, then we're going to go off in the wrong direction. And I believe confidence is one of the most misunderstood topics, probably next to resilience. And they're definitely related. So I think we've been told confidence is feeling good about yourself. And I could not disagree more. And I actually think it's a dangerous definition because then in parenting, we're always trying to optimize for our kid feeling good about themselves. And I would say that tends to lead to a lot of anxiety and a lot of fragility. To me, confidence is self-trust. And I want to dig into that. It's self-trust.
So cool. Yeah.
It's about it's not about feeling like you're the best at something. It's actually feeling like it's okay to be you when you're not the best at something. And so I want to break that down in a couple of ways. Like when I was at Duke.
You did go to Duke, didn't you?
Okay.
I mean,
I
you're
did
a
go to
smart
Duke.
cookie girl. I'm just saying.
Trying my best,
All right, this is
actually,
good
my
stuff.
example comes at Duke. So when I was a freshman at Duke, there was a girl in one of my seminars, and she was just super smart. Like everything she said, everyone's like, "Oh, that's really smart." I didn't think that. And there was a moment in this class where the professor was talking, and I just distinctly remember this moment being like, "I have no idea what the professor's saying. Like I have no idea. I usually know, but I have no idea." And I kind of look around, and everyone was kind of nodding. And I just said to myself, okay, I don't know. I'll just figure it out at the end. Okay. And this girl shot up her hand. And I'll never forget this. She goes,
This girl meaning you?
No, not me. This really
I thought
smart
that's
girl.
what you were saying. Got it. Go ahead. Okay, got
not
it.
This
okay.
girl. Sorry. No. This other person who I very much admired. And she shot up her hand and she said this. She goes, and she looked around at us. She's like, I'm sorry if this is, obvious to everyone else. And she looks at the professor and goes, I have no idea what you're talking about for the last couple minutes. And I usually do follow and I don't. And it seems important. Is there any way you can just review what you said and describe it in a different way? Okay. That is to me the utmost example of confidence, because what she was saying without saying it is, I trust my experience of confusion. And I kind of know it doesn't say anything about me in general or about my intelligence. I am confident in my state of confusion. I feel like it's okay to be me, even when I'm confused, to the point I am going to voice it in front of everyone else. If she was optimizing for feeling good about herself, she would have done what I did at the time. She would have said nothing, right? And to me, that is such a powerful difference. Confidence is self-trust. So how do we then build that? Well, if you think about confidence as self-trust, as opposed to feeling good about yourself, you actually see how you would intervene in completely different ways when your kids come to you. First of all, our best times to build confidence for our kids is when they're having a hard time. Nobody needs help feeling confident when they're crushing things. I'm sorry, you just got an A on your paper, or you just scored the most points in your, in basketball or the most goals. Like, you don't need help there. But when your kid comes home, and this is a good example, and says this to you, I'm the slowest kid in my class. Let's take that. I'm the slowest kid in my class. Okay. If I'm optimizing for my kid feeling good about themselves, this is what I'm going to say. That can't be true. Or wait, but you're so good at math. Or, oh, it was a bad day. I'm trying to take them from the experience of feeling kind of less than or sad. And I'm trying to bring them to the experience of feeling good about yourself. That intervention, I would argue, takes away a kid's confidence. Because what they're really coming to me saying is, let's say I'm the slowest person in class. And they're having a hard time when they're saying this to me. But again, if I can show my kid that I think it's okay to be them when they're the slowest kid in the moment, they're going to feel like it's okay to be them. So how do I build self-trust in that moment? I would say to my kid, it's very loud, right, in my studio. Okay.
New York City.
New York City, that's the reality. I would say to my kid, first of all, I'm so glad you're telling me this. I'm so glad you're talking to me about this, which is actually one of the most powerful things you can say to anyone when they're having a hard time, because it gives them permission to keep going. And then I would say to me the ultimate confidence building words. I think there's 3 words that if you want to build a kid's confidence or your own, you say these words. I believe you. I believe you. If I think about that girl at Duke, she believed her confusion. She didn't have a narrative of, I can't be this, or I don't know, I must have. No, she just kind of was like, I'm confused and I believe it. It's amazing we come out of the womb believing our experience. When you're hungry as a baby, you scream your head off and you don't care about who you're waking up. You know you're hungry. And then when we're an adult, we're like, is this right? Am I overreacting? Would someone else feel this way? Because we've been optimizing for, quote, feeling good or for taking care of other people instead of believing our own experience. So I would say to my kid, I'm the slowest one in my class. I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. They probably say, yeah, we did this race and I was the very last one. Oh, I believe you. Tell me more. Those 3 lines, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. I believe you. And tell me more are 3 lines I believe get to the core of building true confidence. Because if you can tolerate your kid not being the fastest runner, not getting a good grade, not being invited to the party, being the only one who can't read chapter books, guess what? They learn to tolerate that experience. And they then become older kids and adults who feel like it's okay to be them in the widest range of experiences. That's what it means to be anti-fragile and confident and resilient. As opposed to when you're optimizing for feeling good, kids become adults who feel like it's only okay to be them in the narrowest range of experiences, which is the essence of, I kind of think, the fragility that a lot of leaders speak to seeing.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, would you almost say those 3 comments and questions, those are applicable potentially to a leader with the people that you lead?
Well, literally the first time I talked about this on a podcast, I was talking to this, my husband was like, you could really,
repurpose that for corporate.
You could he actually is like, you could really say that to me a little bit more in our relationship. You talk a good game. I mean, think about it. Think about if your partner's like, you're always on your phone and you say, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. And they go, yeah, I'm like trying to get your attention and you're distracted. I believe you. Tell me more about that. Think about someone saying, I deserve a promotion. And maybe as a leader, you're thinking, you started here 2 days ago, but okay, right? But if you say, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. Yeah, I'm doing all this work. I believe you. Tell me more. By the way, to be clear, I'm still probably going to say as a leader, after I've done that, look, I'm on your team. I want you to feel good here. Yeah. My job is also to preserve certain things of the company. A promotion's not on the table right now. I think you're kind of asking also, what could you do and what amount of time could be eligible for the promotion? Let me lay that out for you, right? But now I've really connected to someone. So yes, your kid, your partner, work, same thing. You're playing on a soccer team and someone's like, you're always hawking the ball. You're never passing it. First of all, I'm so glad you came to me with this. Tell me more. Yeah, I'm always open on the right wing. Right. First of all, I believe you. Tell me more. And then I'm going to do with that information what I'm going to do. But this opens up the lines of communication and lets someone feel heard and more confident, which is always the thing we want in our interactions.
Yeah. And you talk about which this sort of builds toward connection capital.
Yes.
And so when we think about what you're talking about, right, which is obviously creating an opportunity for connection, which I think is fantastic. What does that mean? Like, and you're so good at sort of naming things, right, which is so cool. But connection capital, what does that mean, and how can parents build it, right? When you think about some of the tactical things around how do we build connection capital with kids?
I mean, at the end of the day, the only real strategy we have in any relationship is connection. I think another way, I'm big on kind of visuals and formulas because I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
I actually think connection you could think of as a multiplier. Okay. So let's say I want my kid to clean up the toys in their room. And I think I'm doing all the things. I'm reading, I'm saying, do you want to clean up the red blocks or the blue blocks? Or, I'm kind of trying to make it fun. Okay. If connection is a multiplier on the effectiveness of that, then if connection between you and your kid is at a 0, the whole intervention is going to be a 0. Now, if connection's at an 100, and I'm making up these numbers,
sure,
you can do very little. You don't have to probably even do red block or blue block situation because anything you say, right, assuming it's respectful, it's going to be that much more effective. And I think one of the things with parenting that I say all the time is we know what happens when you parent with timeouts, punishments, and sticker charts all the time when your kids are young. Maybe it looks like it works when your kids are young because they're scared of you. But then your kids become like 14 and 15, and I've seen this in my practice, and they're like, oh, whoa, I'm bigger than my parent now, and I don't give 2 shits about your stickers, and you can't put me in a timeout. And we've lost out on 14 years of building connection. And so we're starting at a 0. And so whatever threats you have, whatever other tactics you have, if connection's at a 0, we're starting at a 0. I actually think one of the reasons for American adolescence being as insane and intense as it is, by the way, adolescents should separate from us. They should have some hard moments. But the reason it can get so awful is I think if you parent your kids from punishment and timeouts and just fear for 14 years of your life, well, they're going to reject that and rebel against it when they're finally big enough to not care and not be so scared, okay? So connection is all we have in any relationship. And you know it from your adult relationships, right? When someone tells you something hard or you don't want to hear, how you end up taking it in is just how connected do I feel to this person? Do I feel like they understand me? Do they feel like I know that they know my stories? Do they listen to me? Do they care about my feelings? Now, very important, connection doesn't mean I let someone else's feelings run the show. It doesn't mean I praise their bad behavior. That's not what connection is. I think connection comes from seeing someone else as real and important. And making efforts to be curious about them and to understand them, full stop. And that's what really matters. Now, I just want, right, so again, I'm going to give an example. Someone's like, okay, so my kid says to me, I hate you and I'm not listening to you. You want me to connect to them? I love these, right? And I'd say, yeah, I do. But connection isn't, oh my God, let's throw you an ice cream party. That's just like a thing you give someone.
Yeah.
You probably
it's another example of these extremes that we don't need to. Yeah, totally.
I would argue the kids who act out the most are in the most need of connection. That's why they're acting out so much. They're in pain. They're having a hard time. They're kind of saying, does anyone see me as a good kid? Is anyone going to help me? Right? Like they're asking for help. So in that situation, again, I might set a boundary. Whoa, there's another way you can talk to me. Or, hey, I just need to get through this moment. I'm not going to add more fuel to the fire. And then I'm going to take a deep breath. And look, you and I clearly are not in a great place. If you're talking to me that way, and look, there's stuff you've done, but I'm the adult, and there's probably stuff I've done. And maybe we can carve out some time for you to share some things with me. And I'm going to listen. I don't know if you're right or wrong, but I will listen because me and you have to get to the bottom of this. And I care about you. And you're a good kid, and I'm going to put in some effort to figuring this out. I am on your team. I am on your team. Now, what would I actually do after that? First of all, there's nothing as connecting to a kid as spending 5 to 10 minutes with them, with your full attention, without your phone. No siblings, no phone, no interruption. Our kids need attention from us more than they need praise, more than they need gifts. They just want our attention. And that's going to feel really low stim to parents because it's actually very like less is more. What does that mean? Well, maybe your kid's young and they like to do Play-Doh and you're sitting next to them just watching them play Play-Doh. You're not dictating. You're not saying that could be an airplane. You're just joining their world. Maybe when your kid is 15 and you hate that they play Fortnite, it's actually sitting and watching them play Fortnite for 10 minutes and then saying, oh, tell me more about that, and just learning. You're literally joining their world. And this is what I'll leave with connection. Because if you think about one, and I'm putting my hands out for anyone who can't see me, if you put your 2 hands out in like fists and you look at one of them and you say, this is my world. And then you look at the other and say, this is my kid's world. Our kids have to live in our world a lot. Every time we say, clean up, let's go, time to get ready, our kids don't inherently care about that. They're kind of joining our world. And when we connect to our kid, what we're doing is we are building a bridge from our world to their world. And we ask our kid to join our world a lot. I would say those are like connection withdrawals that we make.
Yeah.
And so if we're not making deposits, if we're not building a bridge, then there's no bridge for our kid to even walk over when we ask them to join our world. And so time with our kid, being interested, right? Just being with them, playing a game with them for no purpose other than play.
Yeah.
Those are all small, and these can be 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It could be spending 2 extra minutes on your kid's bed because you know when you put them to bed, that's the time everything good comes, and just listening and saying very little except, I'm glad you're talking to me about this. I believe you. I love you. I love spending time with you. That's it. It's going to feel very, very small. Those are ultimate connection builders, and that really matters.
What do you say when, you hear sometimes, parents say, well, I mean, they're living under my roof. I'm paying for their stuff. So they're going to live in my world. Like, I'm not building a bridge until they're like, or a parent that's disconnected from a child. Like, what advice do you have for them to, because I couldn't agree. I mean, I think that without connection, nothing can happen with any relationship in life.
That's right.
But what you've seen it all, girl. I mean, you've had a lot of people on your couch, right? Tell me about how do you speak to that? How do you help folks that are going through that?
Yeah, and first of all, I get it. Like, being a parent, I have those thoughts too. Oh, my kid owes me an apology. I don't care that I yelled at them. They owe me an apology. I can get like very like toddler tantruming about parenting too. It's unfair. It's unfair and it's hard. And it's really inconvenient a lot of the time. It is. And I think this, just the first thing I'd say to that parent who's like, but they live under my roof, I'd just be like, I hear you. Like, by the way, I have those thoughts too. And it is so annoying to have to be the adult, even though we are the adult, right? Yes, that's first. The second thing I would honestly say to that parent is I'd say, let's just put aside what you're going to do with your kid for a second. And I'd probably say, and that would be like going for the jugular, I'd say, I want to hear a little bit about what it was like to be a kid in your house growing up. Because what that tells me, and then I get like hit with this wave of sadness for this parent. I imagine us kind of talking about like, this person must have felt so ignored and so small and so unconnected during their early years. I don't care one thing about what that person tells me they remember. If that's their reaction, we think our memories are the things we say. Our most powerful memories are the things we act out. They're implicit beliefs. So, wow, I think I've learned a lot about how this person was parented. So then after that, I'd probably say, wow, so look, even this model of parenting, where by the way, it's not permissive at all, but yes, connection is a part of it. We're talking about you being a major cycle breaker. Like, you would be the first person in your family to do that, which would be like if you were spoken to in English and you really wanted to speak to your kids in Mandarin. I would say that's possible, but wow, yeah, that is a lot. And we're going to take it small, but so there's that. And then I'd probably talk to that parent too. I'd say, what do you want for your kids growing up? How do you want them to feel about themselves? How do you want them to operate, right? And let's just look at it. Like, do you feel like this way, kind of my way or the highway, you're in your house? I'm not going to argue with you about it. It's right or wrong. It doesn't really matter. Really, where I'd start with the parent, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? Does it feel right? Do you feel like it's giving you what you need or what your kid needs? And if a parent said to me, by the way, it's working, and I do think it's how my kid is going to feel confident and successful, I really be like, why did you call me? Like, I have no interest in connecting with anyone who feels like what they're doing is working. I'm not in the business of convincing, but if there's an opening where they're saying, and there usually is, it's not really working. But I think what I'm saying is I'm so fearful that my kids are going to be entitled and snowflakey and soft. I'd say, look, first of all, those are my fears for children too. So I join you. And I wonder if there's a little wiggle room where we can see connection as part of an approach that makes for really strong, resilient, successful kids. Could we play around with that at all? And I think that's probably where I'd start. I love skepticism in parents. I think when you're skeptical about an approach, it's very close to being curious about it. And it's also just a sign you really care about who your kids become as adults. And so I try to really work with that instead of against it.
Yeah. And you talk about get good at repair. And,
Yes.
and I think this is cool, right? And so what do you mean by that? And then I think maybe maybe there's an example, right, of how to repair
Yes.
for parents. Because I just think being able to do that is so critical. And for our kids to see us do that is so critical to drive the connection, to your point.
I'm so glad you're here because I think we hear these things and I hear myself talk on podcasts. I'm like, wow, Becky, you talk a good game. Like, does everyone know you don't do a lot of this stuff sometimes? So of course I don't, because I'm a human and my parenting is perfectly human like everyone else, which means imperfect. And so yes, and this is probably a good thing to like almost end with for people to really take with them, which is if you're going to get good at one strategy as a parent or as a leader in any system, get good at repair. Because everyone is going to have moments where you don't say the thing you want to say, where you're impatient, where you're triggered, where you yell. And to know that that's your opportunity rather than the barometer of your leadership is deeply, deeply powerful. So repair really is going back to a moment that didn't feel good, taking responsibility, and talking about what you would do differently the next time. And what I think is really powerful for everyone to know is when moments don't feel good, let's say with your kids, again, it could be at work too, it registers in the other person's body. They know it didn't feel good. Totally. Either then a kid has to make up a story about what's happening to feel good again, or you can repair and be in charge of the story your kid tells themselves. And I can tell you what kids do when we don't repair. They blame themselves. That's all they do. That's what they do. It's all my fault. I'm a bad kid. And then we wonder why as adults, we all blame ourselves when things go wrong because that's a legacy from our childhood when no one repaired with us. And so what repair sounds like is something like this. I'm sorry I yelled at you in the kitchen. It's not your fault when I yell. I'm working on staying calm, even when I'm frustrated. I'm sure that felt bad. You're a good kid and I love you. And just to get ahead of what people say, but isn't it their fault? I mean, they did complain about dinner. Nobody's complaints or behavior makes us yell. How we respond has to do with our skills of managing our own emotions. And that predated our child's existence. And just to drive this home, the reason you never want to apologize by saying like, but if you didn't complain, I wouldn't have done that. I always think how we react to our kids becomes how they react to themselves and to others. I always just picture, and it's so creepy, like what if one day I'm in my son's house and let's say he's married and someone comes home and they're like, you forgot the paper towels. You always forget. And if then I hear my son say, look, I'm sorry I yelled, but if you didn't forget the paper towels, I wouldn't have yelled. I'd have been like, oh my goodness, that is a toxic relationship. But if that's how I repair, why wouldn't my son or daughter quote? So no, you take responsibility for your part. And that is one of the things that helps your kid do the same. So that is a repair. And when you repair, it's actually another form of massive connection building. And it's so relieving. You don't carry around this guilt and this. And just in case anyone's wondering, it is never too late. You can repair today with your kid for something small. You can repair for something big, like, hey, I was listening to this podcast, and I think whenever you acted out in your younger years, I did just send you away. I sent you to your room, and that probably felt really bad, and I think I didn't know any better, but I'm learning now, and I just wanted to tell you that, and I love you. I mean, think about how many of us would love to hear that from our parents now. So it's never too late. Repair is the ultimate strategy. And when you do repair, I'll just leave you with this. Whenever I repair, I always tell myself, okay, I'm supposed to get really good at repair. Well, if I'm going to get good at repair, I have to yell and mess up. That's the only way to repair. And so when I am about to repair, I tell myself, wait, Becky, I'm trying to get good at repair. Step one is yelling. Crushed it. Did that, right? Don't they always say, Molly, the first step is the hardest step? Like pat on the back. I already did the hardest step. I yelled. Okay. Now I set myself up to do this thing that's going to be so powerful between me and my kid. I can do that. I'm not, again, and we're going to go back to how we started. I'm a good person who yelled. I'm not a monster. I'm a good parent who is having a hard time. With that in mind, I can repair. And that is so powerful between you and your kid.
Yes. So, and I'm going to tell my team real quick to tee up this, but do you have 3 more minutes, 5 more minutes?
I have like a minute. I'm late. I'm supposed to be somewhere at 12:45. Yes.
Okay. Oh, schnockers.
Yes,
okay, cool.
I know.
Okay, I'm going to hit you with rapid fire real quick and then we'll run. Okay,
Let's do it.
Cool?
Let's do it super fast.
All right, cool. Becky, what's a book that every parent should read in addition to Good Inside?
I mean, I really would say Good Inside because I think it'll help you in every area other than parenting too. And as a busy parent, I think we're too busy to learn one thing that only helps us in one area. I think every parent should also read something by Richard Schwartz, who's the author of Internal Family Systems. I think his understanding of how the brain works and how the mind works will be both deeply insightful for you and deeply helpful.
What's the one thing that parents shouldn't worry too much about? And what's the one thing that parents don't worry too much about?
I think when something happens with our kid, we do this thing called a fast forward error. We see our kid shy and we fast forward. Oh my goodness, they're never gonna have friends. We see our kid hit. Oh my goodness, they're a sociopath. And I call that the fast forward error because we get caught up in the future and then we respond today with all the anxiety we have about 20 years from now. So I think my answer to that question is notice the fast forward error, come back and just say, what is going on with my kid today? What is my most generous interpretation? And what skills does my kid need to build today? And then the future will take care of itself.
Yeah, I love it. What about that they don't worry about enough?
I think the thing parents don't worry about enough is themselves. Is like, hey, I am a person under a parent.
Yep.
Also, I have been set up to think this parenting thing should come naturally. And if I kind of look at that narrative with skepticism and a healthy amount of anger, I think what I need to worry more about is, do I know my role? Do I feel supported? Do I have kind of the continuing education around me that any parent, should have? And I think that's the area of focus I would point parents to.
So the show's called Game Changers. Who or what is a game changer who inspires you and why?
Ooh. Who is a game changer and who inspires me and why? Such a good question. I mean, a couple people come to mind. I love Myleik Teal. She is one of the most inspiring people around leadership and truth-telling and the power of community. I've learned so much from her. So she's high on my list. Who else is a game changer? I mean, honestly, I want to shout out every single person working at Good Inside. I really do, because I think what people don't know, and I want them to know, is yes, we want to give you a different approach to parenting, but what really about at Good Inside is giving you a whole ecosystem. I believe parents should have the most sophisticated products, and that's why we have our app. We believe you should have the most sophisticated technology to help making parenting a little easier. We have technology for everything. Why shouldn't we have what feels like a parent coach at our fingertips? And when I think about the people working at Good Inside, what they're saying is, I want to take all my talents, whether it's engineering, digital product, operations, all the data, content, like all the different things people do, and say, and I want to say that my life's work is changing the narrative and elevating parenting. They're game changers.
That is awesome. And there's so much more that we could talk. The digital age, right? Self-care.
So much.
And so people got to check out your book. It's incredible. I really love it.
Check out my
all
book
your other stuff.
Go to goodinside.com. That's just the home for everything. That's where you can get an email from me where I talk about these things every week. That's where you can find the podcast, the book, our membership. It's all there. It's the hub. And there's so many different things, right?
Goodinside.com.
Yes, that's it.
Goodinside.com. Got it. Dr. Becky, you rock. This was super fun.
This
Thanks
was so much fun. Thank you, Molly.